Neighbors tried to steal our land and lost. I will do my best to explain my story. In summary, my husband and I bought a house next to the bullies in the neighborhood. We stood up to them when they tried to steal some of our land, and we won. We are now the neighborhood heroes. It's a long story but very satisfying, so please hang in there. First, some background. My husband and I bought our home on a 3-acre plot of land around 9 years ago. At the time, we were just a few months away from getting married, and this was an exciting moment for us. The day we took possession, we picked up the house key from our lawyer and went to the house. We got out of our car and just took a moment in the parking lot, holding hands to gaze at our first home together. At that point, an older man in his 70s came running from his house to greet us. He'd apparently been waiting for us all day. He breathlessly told us all the previous owner's problems with our house. It ruined our moment. My husband tried to get him to go home politely. He explained we had a lot to do and needed to get the house ready for the moving van to arrive shortly. My husband unlocked the front door, and this man, who didn't take the hint, pushed his way in. He proceeded to inspect the entire first floor, commenting along the way, "Oh, look, they put hardwoods in the living room." He went to climb the stairs, and at this point, our shock had started to wear off, so my husband stood on the first step and blocked him from going upstairs. We finally got him out of our house. I'm telling you this particular story for 2 reasons. First, I wanted to show you how off this man is. Second, during his non-stop verbal diatribe, he pointed out that the green chain link fence between our properties was on our property, and we were responsible for any costs associated with its maintenance. He vaguely pointed to the rear NW corner of our property and said the survey marker showed this. He also noted that the previous owners had dug up the buried front survey monument and moved it, so it was no longer reliable. At the time, we thought this was an odd story, and we dismissed it. We shouldn't have. My mother raised me to be kind and hospitable. My father taught me to keep my friends and my enemies close. So, shortly after we moved in, despite a bad first encounter, we invited the neighbors, I'll call them Joe and Rose, to dinner. They were pretty chatty. They told us what they thought of every neighbor on the block in not very complimentary terms. They explained who they'd called the police on, who they'd called the fire department on, who they'd called animal control on, and who they'd called child protective services on, and so on. No one was spared. My husband and I were dismayed and decided to keep Joe and Rose at arm's length from then on. We chose not to extend any further dinner invitations. So, here's the source of our issue: the property line. Around 6 years ago, we had our driveway repaved, and Joe approached our contractor to have his driveway repaved too. He had a parking pad added that butted up to our green chain link fence. Joe would back his van on this parking pad up against the fence. In May 2017, Joe accidentally backed into the wall. He bent 2 fence posts and split a section of the chain link fence. A friendly neighbor would have come to our door, explained what happened, and apologized. But Joe could be better. We discovered the problem when our 3 dogs escaped through the split in the fence into his yard. It didn't take us long to see what had happened. Later that day, we asked Joe to explain what happened. He denied everything while leaning against a rental car. We did get him to acknowledge that the damage must have come from his property, given the direction of the damage, but he claimed it must have been his snow removal guy who hit the fence months ago. There were no offers to compensate us for the damaged fence. Sadly, I believe he lied because he's at an age where he's worried about losing his driver's license. My husband used wire to repair the fence to secure our yard. We let it go. That should have been that. Shortly afterward, Rose started asking when we would replace our fence. She explained that the repaired fence was ugly and she shouldn't have to look at it. Initially, I thought she was joking and walked away. She brought it up to more times. By the 3rd time, I told her we had no plans to replace the fence. In the spring of 2018, Rose again lamented about the ugly fence, but this time, offered to pay half the cost to replace it. I asked her if she was interested in another chain link fence or a wooden fence. She preferred a wooden fence. I called some contractors to get quotes. On the day the first contractor was scheduled to come over, I called Rose. Before the contractor came over, I wanted to sort out some details about fence height. She explained that Joe told her that because the fence was ours, he would not pay a penny to replace it. That was that. I canceled the contract but asked him how much it would cost to replace the fence with another chain link fence based on linear feet. The cost was around $2,000. Later that summer, Rose approached us again. My husband explained that putting in a chain link fence was expensive and this wasn't our priority. Rose offered to pay half of the cost of the chain link fence. I honestly wanted to walk away but felt we would never have an opportunity to share costs again, so we started negotiating. We wanted the fence to be 6 tall. They wanted it to be 4 tall. We compromised on 5. It would be a wooden fence in our newly constructed back fence style. In addition, we talked about whether to put it on the property line or the existing fence line. Joe preferred the latter. We gave in on that one. After all, according to the back property marker, our fence was only around a foot inside the property line, and Joe was having trouble avoiding the existing fence. He'd just hit it again if we moved it out 1 foot. We also wanted to put 4 glass panels in the back portion of the fence so we would continue to enjoy the view of the ravine past Joe's property, which we had been enjoying with the chain link fence. They reluctantly agreed and even moved the location of a new shed they were installing so it wouldn't block our planned view through the glass. They agreed to pay us $1,000. We decided to bite the bullet and upgrade to a wooden fence. Now, I'm going to make a long story short here. Rose hated the new fence and said it was ugly. They certainly weren't going to pay what they'd agreed to, and further, they would no longer agree to allow us to install glass panels. The ravine view belonged to them and we had no right to it. They planted a hedge on their side of the fence and a blue spruce tree to block our view. At this point, Rose started a screaming campaign. The fence is ugly. We shouldn't have to look at this effing ugly fence. You can't look over here. Avert your eyes. We own the effing view. Every time we went into our backyard, she screamed at us. We tried to bite our tongues, but it was hard. At one point, Rose was screaming at my husband while leaning on our still unfinished new fence. He asked her to back up because she was standing on our property between the fence and the property line. At this point, she became enraged and screamed that she owned the land on their side of the fence because of squatters' rights. So, from this point on, she started screaming all the usual things, plus squatters' rights. Squatters' rights. Squatters' rights. We began to avoid going out into our backyard if they were outside. One day, the fence contractor arrived to work on the fence. We saw him pull up out front and went into the backyard to meet him through the side gate. Both Joe and Rose started screaming the usual complaints. In addition, Rose added some lies about our contractor, how he didn't know what he was doing and had built an ugly fence and was messy and left wooden tools on their property. My husband had had enough and finally snapped, telling Rose to shut up. He also called her a liar. Rose accused my husband of threatening her. At that point, the contractor and his wife, who were bringing their tools to the backyard, made their presence known. Rose suddenly shut up. We had witnesses. At this point, I realized Rose was trying to set us up so she could call the police. She wanted to accuse us of threatening her. I found a lawyer. Our lawyer explained 4 things to us. 1, we had little claim to the verbal contract of $1,000. We needed to let that go. Strategically, we were better off having complete control over the fence and ensuring they had no interest in it. We could build it as we wanted. We didn't need their permission to add the glass panels. 2, they had no claim to adverse possession aka squatters' rights. The developer registered our properties and land titles before the houses were built. In our province, properties registered in land titles with a survey are not eligible for claims of adverse possession per Chapter L5 of the Land Titles Act. There is no title to adverse possession, she also explained. Screaming they own the land over the fence does not give them the land. They must go to court to claim it. 2, they had no claim to adverse Screaming possession over the fence aka
is a
squatters'
crime, private
rights.
nuisance,
The
and we
developer
needed to call the
registered our
police.
properties
The
and land
police would
titles
calm
before the
down this
houses were
escalating
built.
situation.
In our province,
For claiming
properties
to own the
registered
view
in
was
land
simply
titles with a
ridiculous.
survey are not eligible
We
for claims
responded
of
in
adverse
2 ways.
possession per
One, we
Chapter
sent the
L5 of
neighbors
the
a
Land
letter
Titles
explaining
Act.
they did
There
not
is
own
no
the
title
land
to
on their
adverse
side of the
possession,
fence, and
she
provided
also
proof of the
explained.
land
Screaming
registry
they
and the
own the
relevant
land over
legal
the fence does
information.
not
We
give them the
explained
land.
that if
They
walked
must
on
go
our
to court to
property,
claim it. They were trespassing. We also explained that from then on, we would have zero tolerance for verbal abuse. 2, we called the police on the non-emergency line. This was sad for me because I have never in my whole life called the police on anyone. When the police arrived, they spoke to us first. We explained that we wanted the neighbors to stop talking or screaming at us, our family, or our contractors. They wanted to know what kind of things they were yelling at us. I understand they need to be skeptical of things they're told, and they were here. They rolled their eyes when we told them. When Joe and Rose opened the door, Rose became agitated, the word used by the police, and started screaming that they owned the view, etc. One police officer had to ask her to go inside the house and close the door. Joe remained on the front porch and agreed to stop harassing us. While walking back home, we heard one officer say to the other, "I understand what they're up against now." The police explained to us that they felt there were some mental health issues going on with Rose, and if there were any more issues, we should call the police again. He suggested we continue documenting incidents that align with our lawyer's advice. Believe it or not, sending the police over calmed things down for a while. In the meantime, I was worried that Joe would back into the new fence. He would back his van right up against it. I wanted to install a barrier in the space between the fence and the property line that would prevent Joe from hitting the wall. To do that, we needed to know where the property line was. We borrowed a metal detector and found the front marker. We expected it to be a different place. If it was correct, the front of our fence was around 6-7 feet inside the property line, not 1 foot like we thought. We marked the location of the buried property marker with a stake and paint. This upset Joe, and I saw him remove our stake with his riding mower the next day. Because the fence line did not align with the property line, we hired a surveyor. They discovered that not only had Joe removed the front stake we installed, but he had also removed the official buried survey marker with his mower, which is illegal. When Rose saw the surveyors, she came running out and verbally attacked them, saying they could not trespass on her property. The surveyors were very calm and handed her their business cards. They explained that now they had identified themselves, they were allowed, by law, to access her property. Rose placed a lawn chair on her front lawn, sat down, crossed her arms, and stared at the surveyors all day. I was shocked how long this process took. At the end of the day, the surveyors explained that they had some triangulation calculations they had to make at their office and would come back on the following Monday to finish up. They explained the process was taking them a while because not only had the front marker been removed, but the back marker had been moved by over 5 feet. Now, that strange story Joe had told us about the previous homeowners moving the buried monument made sense. He had moved the back monument and the front monument was out of alignment, so he came up with this lame story to explain it. The surveyors returned the following Monday and installed the new front and back markers in the correct locations and added 10 additional wooden stakes along the property line. Now, things made sense. The original fence was around 6 feet inside the property line all along the fence line. Oh my God. When Joe saw the new property line, all hell broke loose. I thought he was going to have a stroke. By this time, I'd told our fence contractor to stop work on the new fence and asked him what it would take to move it closer to the property line. Remember, he'd heard Joe and Rose scream lies about his work and the ugly wall. There was no love lost between the contractor and our neighbors. He wanted to do everything he could to make things right, and if moving the wall was what needed to be done, so be it. So, on Tuesday, he started to dig post holes to inches inside the property line. He laughed whenever Joe and Rose gave him a hard time and accused him of trespassing. We also bought a surveillance camera, and I was able to document the neighbors' bad behavior. They continued to park their van past the string line and were adding their stakes at strange places. We just removed them. So, the fence is now completed to within 2 inches of the property line. We did make some concessions. We didn't install glass panels. This was a hot button for Rose, and she threatened to break them. While holding a hammer, she said, "It would be a shame if they broke, wouldn't it?" Very generously, we also decided not to cut the asphalt on the corner of Joe's parking pad on our property. Instead, we bumped into the fence at the parking pad by 2 feet and installed a wooden barrier so Joe couldn't hit the new wall. We have no appetite for dealing with them if they hit the fence. Rose still complains bitterly that the wall is ugly, but we don't care. An interesting thing happened when we stood up to Joe and Rose. A collective cheer went up in the neighborhood. Several neighbors have knocked on our door to shake our hands, offer support, and tell us their stories with our neighbors. We take comfort in the wins we made, including regaining almost 1,200 square feet of property. This has been a painful and sad chapter for us, but we're grateful for all our other neighbors who are decent and kind. I wanted to share this story to let others know that with patience and support from a lawyer, a surveyor, and a contractor, property disputes can be resolved quite satisfactorily.